If I remember correctly, there are some flame seeds down here. Oh, no, 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 no!
Let's watch our step here, Whitlet. Filming videos in the wild is a constant series of disasters, and I wouldn't have it any other way. I get attacked by bugs a lot, usually bees and wasps, but cicadas here in the Texas summer. There are probably some bugs stowing away in my backpack right now, ready to make the magnificent journey back to my apartment where they can procreate in luxury and feast on my refuse. I've been surprised by rain a few times, taken shelter under some highway underpasses, and when it's too hot, like today, my phone might overheat and just shut down in the middle of filming. One time, wind knocked over my tripod and absolutely sundered my phone, leaving me stranded 2 hours on foot from my apartment. Something worse could happen today. I mean, this is Central Texas. There make-be snakes.
Please don't leave me here. There make-be snakes.
And that's great. The world outside my front door isn't custom-made to fit my preferences. I have to learn and adapt and occasionally suffer. And isn't that kind of thrilling?
I've found that a lot of modern video game adventures lack that thrill. They often feel curated and custom-fitted to my every need, overly concerned that a moment's inconvenience could send me and my money to an even more frictionless virtual experience instead. And so I've developed a special affection for virtual adventures that feel genuinely untamed, indifferent to my comfort, confident enough to hurt me and expect me to stick around for more.
That is one angry cicada. But I didn't always have a taste for virtual suffering. As a little kid, I abandoned a pair of wild and unruly adventures crammed into tiny cartridges and tucked into the margins of one of the most beloved video game franchises of all time.
2001's The Legend of Zelda Oracle of Ages and Oracle of Seasons are unique outliers in the world-famous Zelda franchise. The games were developed outside the walls of Nintendo, in a partnership with Capcom and their subsidiary development team Flagship. Partnering with external developers for a new Zelda title was, at the time, a risky move. Series grandfather Shigeru Miyamoto was very protective of Zelda as a franchise, and he preferred to keep development close to home, especially after the disastrous Philips Interactive Media games for the CDI.
Oh boy! I'm so hungry, I could eat an Octorok!
Now, I'm making an educated inference about that. I don't actually have an official comment to cite because, as a rule, Nintendo does not officially comment on those CDI games at all. They are apocrypha. But if I had to guess, did those CDI games make Nintendo even more reluctant to let outsiders make a Zelda game?
Just pick what you want. I'll handle the rubies.
Yeah, probably. Whatever the reason, we do know that in the late 90s, Nintendo was reluctant to trust outsiders with another Zelda game. And yet, Shigeru Miyamoto himself was moved to share Link one more time by an honest, heartfelt plea. Or a threat. Or neither. Come, follow me down this video's first big rabbit hole.
The man who either threatened Nintendo, made a heartfelt plea about Zelda, or none of the above, the man responsible for putting Zelda in Capcom's hands, is game designer and producer Yoshiki Okamoto, a colorful character and, in my personal opinion, a bit of an unreliable source when it comes to his own long and storied career. Okamoto was a driving force in Capcom, one of the men in charge of their mega hit Street Fighter II, and we do know some things about his career for certain. We know, for example, that Okamoto got his start working for Konami in the early 1980s, first as an illustrator and then as a game designer. In 1982, we know Okamoto designed Konami's massive arcade hit Time Pilot, but how and why Okamoto left Konami in 1984 is a bit of a mystery. In 2021, Okamoto addressed that mystery on his YouTube channel. Apparently, on a day when Okamoto was out on vacation, a programmer friend of Okamoto's got into an argument with the bosses at Konami. The programmer shouted, "I'm leaving, and I'm taking Okamoto with me too," which resulted in both the programmer and Okamoto getting summarily fired, even though Okamoto wasn't in the building at the time.
That's a great anecdote, but for due diligence, we should compare Okamoto's version of the story with Okamoto's version of the story. And let's not forget, Okamoto's version of the story.
In a 1998 interview, Okamoto claimed that he got himself fired by asking his bosses for too much of a raise and personally threatening to quit after his games made bank in the arcade market. Then, speaking with Polygon in 2013, Okamoto cited a different reason for getting fired, because when his bosses ordered him to make a driving game, he made Time Pilot instead. But that's hard to reconcile with the fact that Okamoto designed a second game for Konami after Time Pilot was a hit.
In that same Polygon interview, Okamoto disputed a story about his career that appeared in the Japanese video game magazine Famitsu. It's a story about Lehman Brothers bankruptcy and a licensed Clash of the Titans game.
Well, are you inspired, Perseus?
It's a lot, and we truly do not have time to get into all of it, but the point is, the Famitsu story that Okamoto was disputing was a story that Okamoto himself told Famitsu in an interview 3 years earlier. When it comes to Okamoto, as a great man once said, "The rabbit hole goes deeper. I can go further, I promise." There are crashed sports cars, rumors of debt to the Yakuza. Personally, if you want my educated guess, I think the guy just likes telling crazy stories. But either way, when it comes to quoting Yoshiki Okamoto, there is room for doubt.
YouTube videos about the Zelda Oracle games often claim that Yoshiki Okamoto threatened Nintendo in order to get Capcom the rights to the Zelda franchise. As the story goes, Okamoto warned Nintendo that if Capcom didn't get the rights to make an official Zelda game, he would produce a Zelda knockoff game that infringed on Nintendo's IP. This threat supposedly convinced Nintendo to share the franchise with Okamoto's team. The threat story, popularized by Did You Know Gaming, originated in the German-language gaming magazine Total and their 1999 interview with Yoshiki Okamoto.
It's a great story, but it probably isn't true.
First off, Okamoto's story just doesn't hold up to scrutiny. Video game companies have been making knockoff Zelda games since the original Zelda hit the Famicom. If Capcom made another Zelda clone, why would Nintendo care? Even if Capcom released a particularly egregious Zelda knockoff, that would only open legal liabilities for Capcom, and Nintendo is famously litigious. Then consider that Shigeru Miyamoto tells a very different version of the pitch meeting with Okamoto. According to Miyamoto, it was Okamoto's sincere passion for the Zelda franchise that convinced him to let Capcom develop a handheld Zelda title.
Mr. Okamoto is a young and energetic game developer who says he came into the industry because of games like the original Donkey Kong and Zelda. He came to me and was very serious about developing a Zelda game. He has great teams of developers and he promised to use his best people on this project. Shigeru Miyamoto.
In a different interview, Nintendo developer Takashi Tezuka corroborated Miyamoto's version of the story, lending it further credibility. On top of all that, the source of the threat story is a guy who, in my opinion, has a habit of exaggerating stories about his own career. Weighing all the evidence, it's highly unlikely that Oracle of Ages and Oracle of Seasons began with a threat to Nintendo.
And that's a bummer. The threat story is really fun, but, you know.
It never happened. It never happened. It's a total fabrication. It's a made-up tale.
Then again, maybe you don't believe Shigeru Miyamoto's story either, and that's fine. I am, legally speaking, not your dad. But while that initial pitch meeting is shrouded in confusion and misinformation, we have a large body of evidence to draw from about everything that happened next. And that large body of evidence paints a picture of a turbulent Zelda project rewritten and redesigned many times over, a troubled project racing to beat a lethal deadline. The
pitch that Shigeru Miyamoto actually signed off on was for Capcom to remake the original 1986 Legend of Zelda as a Game Boy Color game and, pending the remake's success, to potentially collaborate on more Zelda projects. But over at Capcom, the developers' focus quickly shifted from the remake to the creative potential of brand new Zelda games. The developers had lots of ambitious and innovative ideas, like releasing individual Zelda dungeons in bite-sized downloadable episodes, which would have positioned the Zelda series at the vanguard of the history of DLC, years before Bethesda sold us all downloadable horse armor. However, that idea didn't stick. Development eventually cohered around the concept of a new trilogy of Zelda games, a project large enough to capitalize on the many fresh ideas brewing in the Capcom flagship offices. This planned trilogy, dubbed The Legend of Zelda: The Mysterious Acorn, would have been themed around Zelda's famous Triforce. One game would have reflected the Triforce of Power, another the Triforce of Wisdom, and a third the Triforce of Courage. Before long, that trilogy concept proved overambitious. Okamoto had originally promised Miyamoto a snappy development timeline of months rather than years, but Capcom couldn't deliver on that promise. Their Zelda games required frequent revisions and redesigns whenever the Game Boy Color's technical constraints interfered with Capcom's vision for the storyline. The ballooning development timeline threatened to extend beyond the release of the Game Boy Color's successor, the Game Boy Advance, which would doom Capcom's Zelda games to release on an outdated console. That was a fate everyone wanted to avoid. For Capcom's Zelda project, the looming Game Boy Advance might as well have been the Grim Reaper. So Shigeru Miyamoto intervened, suggesting that Capcom should consolidate all of their existing work into 2 games instead of 3. Stray pieces of the remake were fused into the existing work on the Triforce of Power game to create the action-oriented Oracle of Seasons, and the Triforce of Wisdom game turned into the puzzle-oriented Oracle of Ages.
We'll never know what that Triforce of Courage game would have looked like. Maybe a psychological horror game in the style of Silent Hill? No, obviously not. Why would you even suggest that?
Miyamoto's intervention was characteristic of his style as a producer. The current producer of the Zelda franchise, Eiji Aonuma, refers to Miyamoto's interventions as upending the tea table, a phrase evoking a stern father figure throwing dinner onto the floor and demanding a new meal. The difference, according to Aonuma, is that Miyamoto sticks around to clean up the mess. And there was quite a bit of mess to clean up for the developers at Capcom. Shuffling so many stray pieces and rogue concepts together required yet another drastic series of changes to the game's storylines. But, thanks to Miyamoto's intervention, the 2 cobbled-together games were able to release in Japan in February 2001, squeaking by just a month before the release of the Game Boy Advance. The finished games resemble some of Link's previous adventures, especially Link's Awakening, another Game Boy Zelda title. In order to thwart the forces of evil, Link must locate and delve through perilous dungeons, confronting a variety of puzzles and monsters along the way. Both games prominently featured new tools that allow Link to transform the world around him. In the action-focused seasons, Link can shift the weather between winter, spring, summer, and fall, to melt ice, stack leaves, and so on. In the puzzle-focused ages, Link can travel back and forth in time, changing events in the past to open up new paths in the present. Both Oracle games burst at the seams with the developers' many ideas. Finishing tasks in one game can open up secrets in the other through a password system. Collectible magic rings provide a variety of strange effects, ranging from the useful, like a tougher hide, to the silly, like masquerading around as an Octorok. There are returning characters, new species, rhythm games, flirty trees, new tools, classic tools, gashapon trees, and more.
We're going to talk about the gashapon trees.
It was a lot to pack into 2 small cartridges, but as messy as the project was, the opportunity to collaborate gave developers at Capcom and Nintendo a chance to peer into each other's radically different worlds. Nintendo developer Takashi Tezuka frequently visited Capcom's Osaka offices during development, where he felt like he was suddenly surrounded by a bunch of jocks. It was a brash atmosphere that suited Capcom's reputation for rebellious outlaw characters and dangerous worlds. On the other hand, Capcom's Hidemaru Fujibayashi found that Nintendo developers prioritized a warm and familiar feeling with their characters, even when those characters barely played any role in the finished game.
Mr. Yamada and co. would ask us, what's this character's name? About characters we just randomly put in the game. Giving those characters a name really brings them to life and the staff's attachment to them evolves. 2. You should name your characters. Such a simple sounding idea really opened my eyes to something important. This is just one example, but I feel like I was taught the secret to Nintendo's warm game feel. Hidemaru Fujibayashi.
In the collaboration between Capcom and Nintendo, the North Star guiding development was the effort to retain that special quality of Zelda-ness without missing out on the unique flavors of Capcom style. The small tasks that educate Link about how to use a new tool, the particular way the camera scrolls in a 2D Zelda. In many ways, Nintendo ensured that the Oracle games didn't lose their Zelda-ness. At the same time, flashy full-screen animations in Capcom's signature style appeared throughout the Oracle games to differentiate Capcom's version of Zelda from the rest of the franchise.
Zelda-ness is... Oh, no. How dare you. Cicada time, baby. Zelda-ness is a difficult quality to pin down in specifics. It's not just about swinging a sword or chucking a boomerang or mowing down grass to hunt for rupees. It's also about how a Zelda title draws the player into the game.
As the longtime producer of the Zelda franchise, and the director of several Zelda titles, including cult favorite Majora's Mask, Eiji Aonuma has a better grasp of Zelda-ness than most. The way he describes it, Zelda games draw players in through an accumulation of small details that remind them what kind of world they're traveling through. That way, the game doesn't end up feeling like a heap of levels and points and boxes to tick. The most illustrative example that Aonuma gives is a bomb shop from Wind Waker, one of the games he directed. In a run-of-the-mill video game, Link might walk into the bomb shop in the middle of the night, talk to the shopkeeper, and trigger a dialogue box that just says, "Welcome." But in Wind Waker, if Link walks into the bomb shop at night, the shopkeeper is surprised, scolding him for wandering around alone in the dark. In that moment, you're not just somebody sitting on a couch pressing buttons to make numbers go up. You're a kid, all alone in the middle of the night. And by strategically placing details like that throughout the game, Nintendo's developers can keep drawing you back into Link's world, transporting you rather than merely distracting you. As the developers of the Oracle games sought to blend Zelda-ness with Capcom's own style, there were compromises to be made along the way. Illustrator Yusuke Nakano, a Nintendo employee who'd illustrated key art for both Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask, felt the need to illustrate the characters for the Oracle games in what he considered to be Capcom style, with a brighter and more anime-influenced look, and Shigeru Miyamoto was not a fan.
Since I was working with Capcom, I wanted to challenge myself and make the artwork look like someone from Capcom created it. We took this newly redesigned Link to Miyamoto, but he didn't seem to like it very much. I felt like it was better for Link to look more in line with the preferences of the customers at the time. I tried really hard to explain this to Miyamoto and he was like,
"Fine. Whatever."
Yusuke Nakano.
On the other hand, some aspects of the collaboration proved very appealing to Nintendo. In particular, a certain Capcom employee caught their eye. Hidemaru Fujibayashi originally operated as a liaison between Nintendo and Capcom, not much more than the clerk standing at the metaphorical bridge between Kyoto and Osaka. But Fujibayashi's passion for Zelda shone through, even in that limited role. And his passion was sincere. The Zelda series had been a formative part of Fujibayashi's childhood.
Fujibayashi-san, were you a Zelda fan too?
Yes, after I got the Famicom, I went straight to the toy store to buy it. I remember running to buy it, fist tight around my New Year's money.
Fujibayashi's passion was not lost on Nintendo's higher-ups. It turns out that for some Zelda games defined by collaboration, the bridge between Kyoto and Osaka was a very good place to stand.
Fujibayashi's role in the development process grew and grew, until he was named the director for the two games. After the Oracle games, Fujibayashi went on to direct Capcom's subsequent Zelda games, Four Swords and Minish Cap. Nintendo liked Fujibayashi's work on those games enough to pay him the truest compliment they could. They stole him, hiring him into their in-house Zelda team. He started his work there directing The Legend of Zelda Skyward Sword, before directing the Zelda game that took the world by storm and redefined the entire franchise for a new generation of players. 3 decades after he ran through the streets of Japan clutching his New Year's money to buy the original Legend of Zelda cartridge, Hidemaru Fujibayashi directed The Legend of Zelda: Breath of the Wild.
But I digress. Before Fujibayashi was directing Breath of the Wild, before he was even a Nintendo employee, he was a clerk at Capcom who stumbled into creative control over the Oracle games. 2 odd collaborations fused together from the remains of ideas too ambitious for their own deadlines. By all accounts, the Oracle games should have been a total mess, but they weren't.
In its glowing Game of the Month review, Electronic Gaming Monthly dubbed the Oracle duology must-own games, and Game Informer wrote that Capcom did Miyamoto proud before scoring the games a 9.5 out of 10. Game Informer was just one of several outlets that emphasized the successful collaboration between Capcom and Nintendo, a recurring theme in the near-unanimous acclaim received by the Oracle games.
Don't think Oracle of Seasons isn't a full-fledged epic just because Capcom developed the adventure instead of Nintendo. Capcom didn't skimp on the game size or challenge level, and the end result is a classic Zelda game that looks and feels like Link's Awakening. Nintendo Power.
When you play it, you can understand why it was delayed by a year and a half. I am overwhelmed by the power of Nintendo and Capcom. Mac Tomoya, Dengeki Online.
Although the development of both these titles has been handled by Capcom, they still have that Zelda quality that we've come to expect. Frank Dry, Hyper.
Another recurring theme among critics was a measured endorsement for the game's relatively high level of difficulty. In line with their role as buyer's guides, gaming magazines of the day would warn players about difficulty as a way of describing a video game's target market. Casual gamers beware. But in the case of the Oracle duology, difficulty was also a marker of their legitimacy as Zelda games.
When I first fought the boss of Dungeon 2, I was defeated without being able to do anything. And I seriously wonder, maybe action games aren't for me. An old man. Takami. Dengeki Online.
These dungeons can be devilishly challenging, if not outright frustrating at times. As in all Zelda games, however, there's a tremendous sense of accomplishment when you finally work through the switches, trapdoors, and interconnected rooms of the maze and kill the boss at the end. Brad Shoemaker. GameSpot.
Critics mostly skipped over discussing the storytelling of the Oracle games. According to a critic writing for RPG Fan,
like most of the Zelda games, you don't play it for the story.
But while there was very little critical praise for the storytelling of the Oracle duology, it wasn't really a target for criticism either. Storytelling was largely just ignored. What criticisms did appear in contemporary reviews were generally mild. For instance, although critics praised the game's graphics, the sound design and music were sometimes dinged.
The sound is not mega impressive, but what GBC sound is. The melody that accompanies gameplay starts out being whimsical and fun, but wears you down by the 20th hour of gameplay. Still, the sound is better than a lot of the tinny fare that normally emits from the Game Boy speaker. Chris Carl. IGN.
Apart from the sound design, some reviewers also levied mild criticism at the control scheme of the Oracle games. Generally, reviewers who criticized the controls felt that the Game Boy's simple A and B button scheme didn't suit a game with so many tools to choose from.
You have to manage an inventory of items that you collect along the way. But with only 2 buttons, controlling everything Link can hold and use is sometimes an arduous task, especially in heated situations. For iDragon. GamePro.
Since there are many puzzles that can only be solved by combining multiple items, some people may find it troublesome to have to frequently open the menu and re-equip items. However, this is inevitable due to the performance of the GB hardware, which has a small number of buttons, and above all, the puzzles are all elaborate and the way items are used is exquisite, so there is no room for complaint. Takami. Dengeki Online.
Similar to the Dengeki Online review, most critics framed their criticisms as minor issues. With small variation from one publication to the next, the international critical consensus for the Oracle games was clear. They were great games, successful collaborations between Capcom and Nintendo, with a high degree of difficulty, a surprisingly broad scope, lots of appealing new features, and a healthy dose of classic Zelda charm. That was the consensus everywhere, except for Japan's biggest gaming publication, Famitsu.
Welcome to this video's second rabbit hole, and yes, this location is on the nose. The Famitsu reviews for the Oracle games stand apart from every other critical outlet. They scored the games 31 and 30 out of 40, which, math tells us, is roughly 7.5 out of 10. That's interesting, right? A seemingly mediocre review in the game's home country, even though everywhere else they were beloved. What issue did the Famitsu reviewers take with the Oracle games? That is not a rhetorical question. I'm asking because I do not know.
I've got two sources for Famitsu's scores for the Oracle games. The first one is a citation on Wikipedia, a citation to the print edition of Famitsu issue 915. But that doesn't really make sense because Famitsu issue 915 released in 2006, and I can personally attest that the Oracle games do not take 5 years to beat. A very kind Reddit user, unitrogen567, went through some of Famitsu's reviews to verify that they weren't covering any Game Boy Color games at all in 2006. Weighing the evidence, the Wikipedia citation seems erroneous. That got me questioning whether those scores were accurate in the first place, but I tracked down a second source, a website called the Gaming Intelligence Agency, which listed the same scores in a post from 2001. That's helpful, but GIA's citation is just the homepage for Famitsu. The best way to confirm the scores and to understand the critics' complaints would be to find the actual reviews.
But I can't. I can't find these Famitsu reviews anywhere online, and believe me, I looked.
Famitsu's website doesn't have them today. The Wayback Machine has a few random captures of Famitsu's review hub from 2001, but none of the actual reviews were captured. There aren't scans of issue 915 anywhere on the internet. Not on the Internet Archive, not RetroMags, not Gaming Alexandria, or Sega Retro. Nor are there scans of issues 630 through 640, the ones released around the right time in 2001, where I suspect the review could actually be found. Frankly, that's insane. I was able to locate complete archives of small Brazilian gaming publications, but Famitsu is missing from the internet? That's impossible. I just needed to look harder. I sifted through the Wikipedia edit history for the Oracle games to find the user who originally added the Famitsu scores, only to discover that they've since passed away. I searched through a variety of Zelda fan sites and fan databases, but the Famitsu reviews weren't there. I tried using eBay screenshots of the tables of contents of several Famitsu issues to narrow down my search, only to discover that games and reviews weren't listed in that table of contents. Issue 637 looked promising, since it featured the hideous Famitsu mascot Neki the Fox dressed as Link playing a Game Boy. But that cover could also be promoting a strategy guide instead of a review, and the seller didn't reply to my messages. In fact, nobody selling any copies of Famitsu on eBay replied to my messages. Tragically, I do not have $500 spare to burn importing a stack of Famitsu back issues for research purposes. As a final Hail Mary, I reached out to Weekly Famitsu themselves by way of Kadokawa, but of course that went nowhere. Dead ends, dead ends, dead ends. This is the official review of a fan-favorite duology in one of gaming's best-known franchises by Japan's best-known gaming publication, and yet, tracking it down is harder than locating the actual fucking Holy Grail.
Every other critic adored the Oracle games, and Famitsu gave them a 7.5 out of 10. It raises some interesting questions, but despite my best efforts, I don't have any answers. The best I can do is provide a little bit of analysis and make some educated guesses.
For starters, we should identify what a 7.5 score actually means. After all, a 7.5 might be an enthusiastic endorsement by some publications, and the GIA article that corroborated the scores implied that 7.5 was a good score for the magazine. But enthusiasm doesn't manifest in Famitsu's other 7.5 reviews from that year. Famitsu scored 2001's Star Wars Starfighter a flat 7.5, and the text of the review is lukewarm. Some praise was given to the game's graphics and to its diverse mission objectives, but the reviewers criticized the high difficulty and obtuse control scheme. The same reviewers in the same issue scored King's Field 4 a 7.5. The reviewers emphasized the game's high degree of difficulty and its corresponding sense of accomplishment, the same template critics would later use to make sense of Dark Souls. But they warned that the game would be divisive, and probably best enjoyed by hardcore genre enthusiasts. And the first installment of 2000's episodic Dreamcast RPG El Dorado Gate, which scored a hair below 7.5, received similarly measured praise. The reviewers found it light, simple, and easy to play, but were disappointed by monotonous combat and inconsistent visual styles. One reviewer questioned whether the finished series would end up being worth the price tag. Compare all of those games to 2000's MotoGP, which Famitsu scored 35 out of 40, a point shy of 9 out of 10. The reviewers compared the graphical fidelity of the game to watching a real race on television. They loved the gameplay, and noted that experts and beginners alike would be thoroughly entertained. It's important to note here that the cartoon portraits of the reviewers in Famitsu were adorable. Just extremely, extremely adorable. I know that's a tangent on a tangent, but look at these little dudes. Look at that Tomberry.
After reading these and other Famitsu reviews from the early aughts, I walked away with two main impressions. First, a 7.5 is not an enthusiastic score. It's a score for good not great games, an endorsement with significant caveats. Second, like other gaming magazines from the era, Famitsu's critical voice was defined by its function as a buyer's guide, always careful to note which kinds of players should spend money on which games.
So even though I don't have access to Famitsu's Oracle reviews, I think I can make educated guesses about their content. At 7.5, Famitsu's reviews probably were meaningfully less enthusiastic than international publications. And given how concerned they were about difficulty as a barrier for new gamers, it's plausible that the Famitsu reviewers dinged the Oracle games for their relatively high challenge level.
Compared to the widespread critical acclaim, Famitsu probably scored the Oracle games lower because of their off-putting difficulty, in line with their other reviews from the era. Hours and hours of my life. Outside of Famitsu, virtually all of the published critics of the day adored the Oracle games when they came out in 2001, but 2024 is a very different world when it comes to video games. And in my opinion, the Oracle games shine today for different reasons. I can actually pinpoint the exact moment that I knew I had to make a video about the Oracle games. It was 2 or so hours into Ages when a big-ass head refused to die.
The Wing Dungeon appears fairly early in the Oracle of Ages, the second of 8 dungeons Link has to conquer. It's not too tricky to get through, and its main reward, the Rock Feather, gives Link a jump button, a simple, satisfying tool that opens up new paths for exploring the world. Completing introductory versions of the game's puzzles, managing attacks from wimpy enemies, it's all gravy. That is, until you get to the big boss at the end of the dungeon, the Head Thwomp.
Remember what Takami said?
When I first fought the boss of Dungeon 2, I was defeated without being able to do anything, and I seriously wonder, maybe action games aren't for me, an old man.
A deranged, many-faced variant of a classic Mario Thwomp, the Head Thwomp is a fire-spitting, ground-crushing chunk of wrath that is, in theory, pretty simple to kill. For all the chaos it can spew, Link is nearly invincible during the fight if he stands on the top left of the screen. Players are almost guaranteed to discover that safe spot because top left is where you want to stand anyway, in order to chuck bombs into the top of the Head Thwomp, which is the only way to damage it. This fight doesn't really test your reflexes. Despite all the fire on screen, Link will spend most of the fight tucked away in a corner, safe from harm. But when you chuck bombs into the Head Thwomp's bomb slot, only one of the 4 faces will actually take damage. The others just get angry. That means you have to time your bomb throw just right, in sync with the spinning faces. Bomb chucking is finicky, so it's very easy to miss your throw by a few milliseconds. And every time you do, you're treated to this interminably long animation. It's about 15 seconds of waiting, and if you're watching the faces, which you have to do, you know immediately from the very first frame that you got the timing wrong. You're just stuck there for 15 seconds, twiddling your thumbs. The real pain of the head thwomp isn't getting killed. That happened to Takami, but it's honestly not a common issue after you find Link's safe spot. No, the real pain is located squarely in those 15 excruciating seconds after you bomb the boss 3 milliseconds late. The thwomp gets slower, and slower, and slower. It feels like it's spelling out the words "you fucked up" 1 pixel at a... It pissed me off. Like, pissed me off. I found myself shouting at the screen, "Hurry up and die!" But then I heard myself. Hurry up and die? Why would I expect that? Why would I expect an enemy to suffer or die in a way that's convenient to me? I think I expected my enemy to die more conveniently, because that's what I've grown accustomed to in modern video games. Irritation makes players put down their controllers, and with so many games functioning as subscription services or pseudo-subscription services, a controller sitting idly on the table is lost revenue. In today's video game market, friction is meant to be greased away, not glorified. But that's exactly what the head thwomp did. It glorified its own inconvenience, reveled in its many, long, excruciating pauses. And that friction became texture, personality. I rendered this enemy's attacks impotent, but it was in no hurry to die, so it obstinately slowed things down, delaying the inevitable, resisting its own destruction in a manner both futile and frustrating. And that works on a storytelling level because the head thwomp is my enemy, and it rightfully has no interest in making my life more convenient. Like the bomb shop owner in Wind Waker, the head thwomp drew me into the reality of a different world, a world where I was fighting a creature that hated me. In my moment of frustration, I was experiencing Zelda-ness. It's in these kind of small-scale interactions and isolated moments that the Oracle games do their best and most authentic storytelling. I'm sympathetic to the critics who wrote off the storytelling in the Oracle games. If you quarantine video game storytelling to cutscenes and exposition and dialogue, then sure, the Oracle games are pretty lean. 2 lands are attacked by 2 cackling villains on a mission to sow chaos, and Link must travel far and wide restoring order. The larger motivations of the Sorceress Varan and the hulking General Onyx are mostly incidental, the cutscenes light and trivial. But there's more to storytelling in video games than cutscenes and dialogue. In the Wing Dungeon, Link encountered a giant stone head that looked extremely dangerous. He realized that standing on the proper ledge rendered the giant head completely harmless. But the relief was short-lived, because the giant head soon revealed its true strength, a petty, obstinate, irritating personality that tested the limits of Link's patience. That's a story too, one that emerges organically, and maybe even unintentionally, from the gameplay itself. Much of a game's story lives in the way a game feels. Personality and characterization can be enhanced or undercut or even invented by game mechanics. And sometimes, the most impactful storytelling comes from the mechanics that feel awful. The critics were dead on about the interface problems in the Oracle games. Moving through ages and seasons with 2 action buttons is a righteous pain, much more so than in the 2-button Zelda titles that came before. Take the original Zelda for the NES. Link's got 2 buttons to use. The A button is always Link's sword, whereas the B button can map to one of 8 pieces of equipment. You don't find yourself forced to switch between those 8 choices very often. It's largely a matter of personal preference. The system works. Technically, the original Japanese version of Zelda had 1 extra verb, although it wasn't exactly a button. The Japanese Famicom controller had a built-in microphone, and you could shout into it to instantly kill a certain type of monster. Video games are weird. There wasn't a built-in microphone of death, but Link's Awakening upped the count to 12 items, any of which can be mapped to the A or B button. That's more complex, but manageable. Now consider Oracle of Seasons, which jumps up to 14 pieces of equipment, 2 of which have sub-menus to select ammunition types, of which there are 5. That means you functionally have 22 pieces of equipment to swap between, some of which are locked behind sub-menus. Adding to the mess, a lot of puzzles require 3 different pieces of gear to complete, and that's if you know how to solve them right away. If you need to experiment, you have a whole arsenal to stumble through, all mapped to button A and button B.
It doesn't feel good.
It's not like every Game Boy Color game suffers from these problems despite the limited controls. So wherefore this clusterfuck of convoluted accoutrements? I have 2 working theories. First, remember that the energetic young developers at Capcom were bursting with fresh new ideas, enough for a trilogy and a remake of the original Zelda. That's 4 games worth of items and puzzles all crammed into just 2 games. That might explain the glut. Second, the Oracle games were developed in the afterglow of Ocarina of Time. That landmark game also expanded Link's inventory and set a design precedent for giving Link a broader variety of verbs with which to act. It makes sense that the developers at Capcom would reach for similar heights. But the Nintendo 64 controller used to play Ocarina of Time featured roughly 800 million buttons. A complex puzzle could require Link to use 4 or 5 different items without ever once forcing you to open a menu. Ocarina of Time is a joy to play with the N64's embarrassment of buttons, but the Oracle games were much too ambitious for the A and B button on the Game Boy Color.
So the nuts and bolts of switching items feel bad, but what personality emerges from that friction?
The experience of the late game in both ages and seasons is one of clumsiness. You're constantly hunching down to scrounge around your inventory, accidentally replacing your sword with your shovel, slotting the right ammunition into the wrong tool. A monster is hurling energy balls at you, and you have to shout "time out" and rustle around in your pack for a moment, briefly pausing to try to remember what your magic staff even does. It doesn't help that some of your tools make your life harder rather than easier. Platforming is one of the trickier tasks in the Oracle games, with timing and hitboxes that just don't line up quite right. So when you upgrade your jumping tool in Seasons, it's natural to feel excited. But your excitement melts into dread when you realize how the upgrade actually works. To jump your original shorter distance, which you still have to do pretty often, you've got to press the button very quickly. How quickly? Well, it's kind of hard to say. The difference between a full jump and a short jump is only a few finicky milliseconds. Short precision jumps that used to be easy become drastically more irritating. You're permanently stuck with a worse tool for what used to be an easy job, and you have to root around an overstuffed backpack to find it. You can contrast all this clunkiness with the experience of a game like Ape Escape, which has an especially slick interface. In that game, you can map 4 high-tech gadgets to the face buttons on your controller and swap between them freely, swinging them here and there with the right analog stick. The gadgets pop into and out of existence with a satisfying thwomp sound. Popping your gear into existence with ease suits a sci-fi cartoon game, and it quickly starts to feel natural. You're only using 1 gadget at a time, so you never get that uncanny feeling that your virtual avatar has 3 or 4 extra hands. In Ape Escape, you feel like a kid in a cartoon playing with an arsenal of easy-to-use high-tech toys.
But what do I feel like when I'm filming outside and I get lost in the woods? Well, maybe the wind picks up a little bit and I need to add some soil to my sandbags to stabilize my tripod, right? That means I need my shovel. So let's see. I've got hydration, which I can't show you because I didn't Greek it. I've got pages and pages of the finished script, so you probably can't hear what I'm saying right now. I've got my sound and that's speeding. My headphones are in here. And I've got a copy of Super Metroid for the SNES. Why do I have this? And also, what was I looking for? All of this gear is not swarming out of the ether like in Ape Escape. I have to root around in here like Link. It's a tactile reminder of all the things that I'm carrying and of the many things I still have to do with my 2 action buttons.
For frictionless ease of use, the inventory in the Oracle games scores low. That's why critics dinged it. But the inventory gives the games a unique personality. Link isn't masterfully juggling a bow and a bomb and a sword and a shield in one hand. He's a kid rummaging through a messy backpack. He's lost in the woods, and it isn't easy, but he's making the best of it.
A stubborn head thwomp that drags out its animations. A messy backpack that's hard to use. The mechanics of the Oracle games are prickly, and that texture tells a story that is much more rare today than it was in 2001. In this story, the adventure doesn't cater to Link. Link has to adapt to his adventure.
Your objectives in the Oracle games are often vague. Where a waypoint might rest on your screen today, Link often has to rely on the clues provided by 2 wildly unhelpful trees and the idle gossip of townfolk. When that's not enough to go on, and it rarely is, all you can do is wander the wilderness, poking around here and there until you find a new way forward. Your tasks don't line up single file for you. They're a scattered jumble, and you have to go find them.
You're lost in the woods.
The Goron dancing minigame is surprisingly difficult. Link has to successfully dance with the Gorons to earn their trust, but the rhythm is odd and the timing is awkward. You're going to fail a lot before you succeed, and that makes sense. You're performing a dance you've never seen, a dance made for a different species that you found holed up in a little cave in a mountain. You're going to trip, you're going to stumble, and you're going to make a fool of yourself.
You're lost in the woods.
To travel back and forth through time and ages, Link has to utilize portals which can only be created in specific places. Some of the portal locations are obvious, but not all of them. At one point, I got stuck for 15 minutes, wandering around looking for a portal that I knew I needed to find, with 0 success. In desperation, I started swiping my sword at chunks of grass, and underneath a random chunk of grass, I found the hidden portal. I was not well pleased. But this is overgrown wilderness we're talking about. Sure, when you get closer to civilization, man-made conveniences will make it easier to find what you're looking for. But when you're deep in nature, you're gonna have to hunt, sniff, crawl on your knees and sift through the brush. You're not going to find quick answers. You're not going to find convenient signposts.
You're lost in the woods. Cards on the table? A few times during my playthrough of the Oracle games, I got so lost that I turned to the internet for aid. Yes, I'll admit it, and yes, I do feel a little bit sheepish about it.
Some of the puzzles you confront, and some of the hidden objectives you have to find, are bona fide stumpers. There's nothing that demands Sierra Moon logic, no sticking masking tape onto a shed door to collect a cat hair mustache. The really obscure puzzles in the Oracle games are just solvable enough that you'll still feel like a complete dunce after you look them up online. Deep into ages, I got stuck on the battle with the evil sorceress Faran. Seemingly nothing in my weapon arsenal made a dent in her defenses, no matter when or how I applied them. I tried different combinations, different timings, different weapon interactions with the environment, and nothing worked.
But that was my mistake. I was using my weapons.
Technically, I could have worked out the solution for myself. I could have recalled the minor plot point from the first hour of the game when the Queen wanted her minions to go find mystery seeds. And I could have recontextualized that plot point with the news that Varan was manipulating the Queen. Then I could have deduced that it was Varan, not the Queen, who actually wanted the mystery seeds. From there, I could have guessed that Varan wanted to hoard these normally non-damaging items because maybe, just maybe, they were the only items which could break through her magical defenses.
I could have figured that out for myself, but I didn't.
I'm not alone. One of the critics writing in 2001 admitted in his review that he needed a strategy guide just to finish the Wing Dungeon in Oracle of Ages. And like I said, critics were careful to note the high level of difficulty.
Accomplishing everything in both games will be grueling, but you'll have fun doing it.
I'm aligned with the critics about the Oracle game's difficulty, and also like the critics, I found myself impressed with the Duology's bright, colorful visuals. As a rule, games released late in a console's life tend to exude a special deluxe quality, taking advantage of years of experience with a particular piece of hardware and really pushing that hardware to its limits. In my opinion, the Oracle games are an excellent example of that rule. And anybody curious about the Game Boy Color as a console, or 8-bit games in general, will appreciate just how much is squeezed out of and into the tiny Oracle cartridges. Those colors really pop. And forget what the critics said about audio, the sound effects sparkle. I mean, just listen to this ultra-satisfying digging sound effect. The character sprites, diminutive as they may be, are efficiently designed to highlight their charms, and the animations are well crafted and effective. By weaving all of these elements together, the games wring a remarkable amount of appeal and interest out of 8 measly bits. Look, maybe it's because I've been playing the original Apple II version of Wizardry while I work on this video, but to my tired eyes, the Oracle games look really damn good. As pleasant as I found the presentation of the Oracle games, I honestly think that's just one small part of their magic. More than graphics or sound, it was the frustration and the unique personality which grew out of that frustration that truly absorbed me into the experience.
And before I move on with the video, there's one more tale of frustration that I'd like to share.
These are the Tokay of Crescent Island, and I hate them. Crescent Island is completely cut off from the outside world, thank fucking god, and Link only winds up there because his raft gets destroyed by a storm. He washes up on the shore, knocked out cold, which is how the Tokay find him.
What would you do if you found an unconscious stranger lying in a heap at your doorstep? Would you try and nudge him awake, maybe call for help, even carry him to shelter? Cool. Then you don't live on Crescent Island.
The Tokay who find Link unconscious on the beach root through his pockets and rob him blind. The sword, the shield, the shovel, the roc's feather, the power bracelet, it's a miracle they don't steal his clothes, too. When Link comes to, he has to go from Tokay to Tokay in search of his items. The Tokay claim, however, that the items are rightfully theirs, and so Link has to undergo a series of trials and travails to earn back every single one of the tools he's collected throughout the game.
It's a massive headache, and it's so goddamn brilliant.
Gathering new tools has been a key element of the Zelda series since the moment Link first found a sword in a cave, and by 2001, Nintendo had absolutely perfected the dopamine release of finding and mastering a new item. It's a beautiful rhythm. The moment Link approaches a new tool is electric with anticipation. What new paths will be open to explore? What formerly invincible monsters will be rendered vulnerable? In what unpredictable ways is the world around Link about to be transformed? Then, the area immediately around the tool gives you a chance to learn the basics. Near a bow and arrow, you'll find some targets that need shooting. Near your first bomb, you'll find an inviting crack in a wall just waiting to be blown open. You grow more familiar with your tools with each new use case, and by game's end, those obstacles don't even feel like obstacles anymore. Every crack in the walls, every target that needs shooting, they're all miniature puzzles you know exactly how to solve, reminders of the game mechanics you've mastered and the valuable tools you've earned. Crescent Island takes that core design philosophy and flips it perfectly upside down, weaponizing it against you. Familiar obstacles don't give you a dopamine hit, they strike your temple like tiny 8-bit mallets. You see a path blocked by boulders and instinctively reach for your trusty power bracelet, but it isn't there. So you double back to find a pit that you can easily jump over with your rock feather, but there's a rock feather shaped hole in your pocket where your rock feather used to be. You earned these tools, but you don't have them, and the game screen is littered with reminders of all the phantom limbs dangling from your virtual body. You could almost call it ironic.
It's like 10,000 spoons when all you need is an
Octorok.
The Tokay of Crescent Island take the preceding 15 years of Zelda history and flip them completely upside down. The specific parts of your brain that Zelda games usually soothe, those are the exact spots that the Toke stab. It's inspired. I don't remember every chest I've opened in every single Zelda game, but I will never forget the Toke. They've left their obnoxious imprint on my memory forever. At least, I think they did. I mean, that's the way I feel right now, but I can't really be sure. Because if returning to Oracle of Ages decades later taught me anything, it's that memory can be unreliable. Growing up, I didn't play a lot of video games right when they came out. Neither of my parents had any interest in gaming, and so video games entered our house in two big batches. On Christmas and on my birthday, I'd get the games I pined for months earlier. Even then, my parents were bargain hunters, collectors of coupons, and it was always the older games that went on sale. I'm not complaining, by the way. Many of those older games were incredible, and playing games from different eras side by side played a huge role in shaping my nascent critical voice. One summer in the mid-aughts, over a plate of really good Tex-Mex, my dad gifted me a copy of Super Metroid, a game that I still cherish to this very day. And that's why I didn't mind diving into older games, but it was a rare treat to play a game right after it released, something that made any game feel all the more special. Playing a newly released game felt like playing with a big crowd of people all at the same time, even if you were technically playing alone. And that's the way I played Oracle of Ages.
The Oracle games were the product of a fascinating and unlikely collaboration between two very different teams working 6,000 miles away, and as a 10-year-old kid, I didn't know any of that. For me, video games were essentially just alternate dimensions that materialized fully formed on the shelves at Blockbuster, and in the case of Zelda, they usually materialized in a restricted section. In 2001, my household had a PlayStation, a Game Boy, and a PC. Video games released on the N64 might as well have been released on another planet. The gaming magazines I read voraciously had been hyping up this ocarina game for years, and so had my friends on the playground, but I had no machine with which to play it. Link's Awakening wasn't on my radar back then. The only Zelda game that my classmates talked about was Ocarina. So when gaming magazines announced the arrival of the Oracle games, they seemed like my long-awaited invitations to a party I'd been peering at through foggy windows for years. I devised a plan with a friend to buy Ages while he bought Seasons, so we could compare notes and link up the games. He insisted on playing Seasons because, according to him, the girl on the box was hotter.
From what I recall, my friend gave up on Seasons after just 1 or 2 quick play sessions, whereas my process of giving up on Ages was a much more protracted affair.
In 2001, years before I would ever hear the term softlock, I became convinced that I had softlocked my playthrough of Oracle of Ages. For the uninitiated, a softlock is when a video game still runs, but progress in that video game becomes impossible. You might technically be able to move around, but effectively you're stuck. Maybe you threw away an important item and then saved your game. Maybe the game glitched, leaving you trapped in a room with doors that won't open. Sometimes you don't know what exactly went wrong, just that you can't move forward. And that's what I thought happened to me in Oracle of Ages. A convoluted dungeon puzzle requiring careful progress through a series of rooms had evidently tangled itself into a perfect knot, leaving whatever switch I needed to flip trapped behind an obstacle I couldn't clear. It was all because of those damned red and blue blocks in Dungeon 5, the Crown Dungeon. Switching the active blocks between red and blue changes the layout of the dungeon, and somehow, I'd misspent a door key in the wrong layout and then died, leaving me unable to return to where I left off, and unable to find a key anywhere else.
I couldn't ask my friend for advice. He'd given up on Seasons ages ago. I did borrow his strategy guide, and it didn't actually help me at all. I had nowhere to turn, and I was hopelessly stuck. I could have just quit on the spot. Maybe I should have, but instead, I raged against the dying of the light. I became a magical acorn farmer.
One of Flagship's many innovations in the Oracle games was the Gasha tree, from whence came the acorns of the game's Japanese title. The name gacha refers to gashapon machines, hand-cranked toy dispensers in Japan that resemble American gumball machines. The name itself is an onomatopoeia for turning the hand crank and receiving the prize, like gasha, gasha, pun. And then I'll re-record that when I think of a better way to explain that. The core appeal of gashapon machines is that you don't know which toy you're going to get. Every time you spin the crank, you're hoping for something rare, something precious, a cut above the more common rewards. And then, pun, the reveal. That cycle of tension and release keeps you inserting more coins over and over again, which is what makes the gashapon model both lucrative and potentially addictive. Modern video games have seized upon that business model. You'll find it in the multi-billion-dollar industry of so-called gacha games like Genshin Impact, as well as the scourge of loot boxes that you can purchase with real-world dollars in many popular games. These games use a variety of psychological tactics to pressure players into spending as much as they can afford on games of chance to win rewards that can only be used inside the same game that's constantly funneling them into more games of chance. For further information about the psychological harm gacha games inflict on players, including minors, see these citations.
It's gambling. It's literally just gambling. But for kids.
But the gacha trees in the Oracle games were much, much more innocent. Unlike modern games, which ply gamers for real-world money to earn another spin at the wheel, tending to gacha trees was a matter of labor and curiosity rather than credit card numbers. Players could seek out hidden patches of fertile soil, plant the rare seeds they found on their adventures, and then return later to harvest the gigantic capsule-like acorn dangling from the fully grown gacha tree. No microtransactions, no pressure, just fun little surprises. Modern gacha games hit your system like crystal meth, but a gacha tree in Labrina felt like a warm cup of green tea you could sip in the shade. As a kid, I already had some latent goblin tendencies. I loved trinkets and baubles, shiny rocks and rare old coins. Whenever my family went to boring places like nursing homes or churches, my dad would sometimes lead me outside to hunt for trinkets on the ground, including fallen acorns. The right acorn with the right color and sheen was as valuable to me as solid gold. And virtual though they were, the gacha acorns in Oracle of Ages were premium specimens.
Just look at that sprite, that beautiful, beautiful sprite. Even today, I yearn to crack open that 8-bit acorn like some men of faith yearn to see the true face of God.
Inside a gacha acorn, players could find a variety of rewards. There was standard Zelda fare, rupees and pieces of heart and magic potions, and you could also find some of those new magic rings with their odd surprising effects. You'll never find a door key in a gacha acorn. The games simply weren't programmed that way, but as a 10-year-old kid, I didn't know that. I didn't have the intuition that a potentially infinite source of farmable door keys would ruin the fun and challenge of the game. All I knew was that I needed a key to progress, and that gacha acorns yielded random items. So I played a minigame to win some gacha seeds, hunted down rare planting spots, and wandered the wilderness, waiting for the trees to grow. Then I harvested the acorns and found some rings and some rupees inside, but no key. I played the minigame again, won some more gacha seeds, and sought out rarer planting spots. I tried planting the seeds at different times of day in the real world in case that made a difference, like it did in Pokemon Silver. But no difference, still no key. Play the minigame again, hunt for planting spots in every corner of the map, harvest, no key. Minigame, plant, harvest, no key. Repeat, repeat, repeat.
Of course, I never found what I was looking for. It was a doomed quest from the start, and after much too much time spent grinding away, I gave up on the game and I moved on.
Oracle of Ages haunted me for years afterwards, a fan-favorite Zelda game that I owned but left unfinished. The thought of a replay would occasionally cross my mind, but that thought never took root. At least, not until Nintendo started adding Game Boy Color games to the virtual collection on the Switch. And then I got drafted in to pet sit for an adorable chihuahua, and I only had my Switch to keep me company while she napped. It seemed like the universe had made the decision for me. It was time to finish what I started more than 20 years ago.
That Chihuahua, by the way, had a surprisingly comprehensive knowledge of Zelda history and lore.
Hello? Can you help? Do you know how to solve this dungeon? You already know how that playthrough went. I got some new headaches to savor, and I fell for the unique charm and texture of this forgotten old gym. I got stumped a few times, but never truly stuck. I cleared my old arch-nemesis, the Crown Dungeon, without too much trouble. Straight after finishing Ages, I played through Seasons, just like I planned to do with my childhood friend. The focus on action rather than puzzles made for an interesting contrast, and completing the boss battles that tie the two games together felt like a truly satisfying conclusion. It was interesting to mark the difference between replaying the Oracle games and my earlier replay of Blasto. With Blasto, all of the nostalgia that propped that game up melted away as soon as I progressed to new territory, allowing me to see the game with and without rose-colored glasses at the same time. It proved to me that nostalgia can gleam bright enough to completely obscure the actual game hiding underneath. By contrast, after I left Ages for the uncharted territory of Seasons, I still really liked what I was playing. The new characters were still charming, the wilderness still felt truly wild, and the new mechanics demonstrated the sturdiness of the core design concepts. Transforming the world with seasons rather than aeons felt just as playful and appealing, if not more. I could see the Oracle games with and without rose-colored glasses, and I liked them both ways.
I returned to vanquish the old demons, the two looming oracles, and I succeeded, discovering two easy-to-love headache inducers in the process. I was satisfied. Pretty satisfied. Mostly satisfied. But I could still go a little bit further.
As a kid, I got stuck in the Crown Dungeon due to a softlock. That's the story as I knew it, the story I always told myself. But throughout this video, I've been verifying my claims as carefully as I can. I went down one rabbit hole to investigate Yoshiki Okamoto's claims about threatening Miyamoto, and I went down a second rabbit hole in search of Famitsu's review of the Oracle games. But there was a third and final rabbit hole still left to explore. I have my memories of playing Oracle of Ages, but I also have something much more reliable. I still own the cartridge. I didn't sell the game or delete my save. In a very literal and tangible sense, I can go back to the exact place where I was stuck more than 20 years ago. My softlock in the Crown Dungeon is a verifiable claim, so I popped my cartridge into my Game Boy Advance and... shit. My GBA is dead.
But luckily, I don't need my Game Boy Advance, because I have a rare and precious superpower. I know human beings in real life.
My dear friend Cassie still owns a working Game Boy Color, and she volunteered to let me use it in the video, despite the fact that I'm one of the most annoying people she knows.
The internet's not gonna judge your car.
You know what? I should have let someone else loan you a Game Boy.
It did feel strangely poetic that a Game Boy Advance, the same console that had been haunting the development of the Oracle games, should fail where a Game Boy Color then succeeded. Once again, I had a cute dog hanging out next to me in a friend's home while I plunged back into Oracle of Ages. But this time, I was plunging way back into a world that had remained frozen in place since the early days of the Bush administration. Ages is already a complicated game, and it's even harder to jump back into the game midstream. And I have the note, like, it doesn't make sense, this is not right. But slowly, the puzzle pieces click together, all to form a picture I didn't expect. Cartridge Link already had the Noble Sword, the upgraded version of his starting sword. That's more progress than I expected, but according to the internet, it's technically possible to get the Noble Sword before the 5th dungeon. Somewhat surprising, but not shocking, considering I borrowed that strategy guide from my classmate. But Cartridge Link also had way more hearts than he should have had by the 5th dungeon, and on top of that... I'm way further into the game than I remember that I was. Because I've cleared the entire map, which means... My friend Cassie asked the obvious question.
Did you finish the game and forget?
I kind of think I might have finished the game and forgotten. Fortunately, based on gaps in Cartridge Link's inventory, I could rule that out too. I deduced that I actually made it to Dungeon 7, Jabu Jabu's Belly, which is much further than I remembered. I can see why I mixed the two dungeons up. Jabu Jabu's Belly has a mechanic of raising or lowering the water level. Just like the Crown Dungeon, you make progress by flipping switches to change the layout of the dungeon around you. That left only the big question, the claim I needed to interrogate. Was I missing a door key I needed to progress? Was I really soft-locked out of completing Jabu Jabu's Belly? This is the room this is the room with all the water level gauges in it. And it's the one that I couldn't get to and therefore was stuck. And I'm in it right now. I'm a clown. Yeah, I could have beaten this, for sure. I was not actually stuck.
Oh. It was a crazy year.
I mean, 2001.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
The United States respects the people of Jardins. Believe, after all, we are currently its largest source of humanitarian peace.
But I'm literally in the place. Like, I'm in the room where I was like, I can't get to this room anymore. I'm just stuck. Mm-hmm. And I'm physically in it right now. Mm-hmm. It's gross.
So how old were you when you played this before, then?
I also just found a second way into the room. I was 11. Jesus, that is wild.
I was never soft-locked. I was just stumped by a puzzle. All the gacha trees in the world wouldn't have made a difference. The world wasn't broken, I was just confused. I was a kid, and I got lost in the woods. I don't know if that picked up at all, but a cicada just tried to start a chorus, and nobody went with them. I feel you, bro. Making these videos is a constant series of rabbit holes, debunked memories, debunked myths, and infuriating dead ends. And I wouldn't have it any other way. This video took a really long time to research and to make, but it turns out Zelda is a really lovely series to get lost in. I can't say I had a bad time. At least, not in the aggregate. Hours and hours of my life. Then again, the version of me saying this right now hasn't started editing the video yet, so who knows?
Bring some bug spray next time. That's my take from the editing booth. Bring some bug spray next time you go into the woods. You true buffoon.
Some of the games I talk about on my channel are pretty niche, and that can make them hard to research, but that was not the problem here. The Zelda games are widely beloved and commercially successful, and that means there is an ocean of Zelda research material to explore. But there's also a lot of misinformation that gets passed around too. It was a good reminder to approach the world with both curiosity and a healthy amount of skepticism. A reminder that when buyer's guides interview game developers, those game developers are probably trying to sell you something, even if that something is just a more entertaining version of their own lives. But I have been shambling around in the woods long enough. I've given the bugs enough of me to bite, so it's time to wrap this video up, to make a big concluding statement that ties the whole video essay together. In 3, 2, 1... I don't know. I don't know. You own a Switch. Go play Zelda.
Don't mind me, I'm just gonna mow some grass while I do the ending ramble. First and foremost, right out of the gate, a correction. I said neither of my parents had any interest in gaming. Not true! My mom loved The Sims. She loved designing houses in The Sims. Sundays were her day to play The Sims. There was no computer time for anybody else on Sundays. I cannot believe I forgot that. I want to thank my friend Jay Rios. I dithered on this video for way too long, and then Jay made a comment about the connection between misinformation and my faulty memories, and it really just tied the video together. So thank you, Jay. You kick ass. I also want to thank StuMath. the author of the program Labrina Lab that I used to make that opening gag with all the monsters. Also, once again, a huge thank you to my sister, who captured the home movie footage that I used in the video. The Panasonic VHS playpack that our family had used for decades died on my sister, and she had to figure out a solution anyway. So, sister, thank you. I don't have a great track record for telling you guys correctly in the ending ramble what videos are coming next. My bad. I think I want to try and do some short reviews, like 10-minute reviews that just kind of glide across the surface of a few video games. That's a terrible pitch, but it'll be better than that. It'll be better than that. And that wizardry footage was foreshadowing, I guess. I'm planning to do a video about Wizardry 4, torturing myself with one of the hardest games of all time. We'll see if I can handle it. I've got a lot of videos on the channel at this point. I've got videos about Blasto, videos about Legend of Legaia and Hidenori Shibao, Baldur's Gate 3, Triangle Strategy. So if you're new around here, stick around. It is, at time of recording, not illegal to like the video, leave a comment, or subscribe to my channel. And until next time, don't forget, money is fake, arm the homeless.